Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Toni and I'm a homeschooling mom to 4 kids. You may have clicked on this video out of curiosity about me. I've been wanting to do this video for a while. I've had a handful of people over the last couple years ask me about my testimony. They'd love to hear my testimony. I've been wanting to share it, but just waiting for the right time. And I have felt like this is the right time. So I'm gonna share a little bit about me. Some of you guys might know me, some of you guys might not know me at all. There's a lot more to me than just thrifting and homeschool, but that is what I talk about on this channel. Typically I talk about thrifting, I talk about homeschooling my kids, and about just being a mom. So I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and give you a little peek into me and who I am. And as you saw on the title of this video, after I share all these things about what brought me to today, I'll share the reason why I am going to South Africa. So let's just kind of unbox who Toni is. So if you're curious about me and my life story, you might want to stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to start all the way back from the beginning. My name's Toni. I am one of 3 children, and I was raised in a Christian home. I was born in Virginia, and I had 2 parents that took us to church every Sunday, especially my mom. She always made sure, no matter what, we were at church every single Sunday. So I grew up in the church every single Sunday. We were there every Wednesday night, every Sunday night. We were just that kind of family. So I feel very blessed to be a person that was exposed to God at a young age. So I actually got saved when I was 6 years old, which is really young. You may think, oh, that's crazy. How do you even know at 6 years old? I knew. I heard all the Bible stories every single Sunday, and every time the doors were open, and from my mom and the stories at home, and all I had heard about God. I knew I had this desire in my heart to go to heaven one day. So that was really, as a 6-year-old, that was what it was. It was, I want to make sure that when I die, I go to heaven. So in the church parking lot one day after church on a Sunday, we sat in our big old brown Ram van, and I told my mom that I wanted to ask Jesus into my heart, and I did. So that was the start of all of it. I had a good childhood growing up for the most part. I faced a lot of trials as a child. I was raised by a dad who struggled with alcoholism, and that was really hard for me. He was not bad in the sense there was never abuse or anything like that, but it was an addiction. And that's hard as a child to try to understand, why is this being chosen over me? So I did struggle with that and didn't have a super close relationship with my dad. He did go to church off and on over the years, and my mom is completely sure that he was saved and just struggled with this addiction. I don't know. We'll find out one day. That was one of the hard things growing up, was growing up with an alcoholic father. A couple other things that happened that just kind of stick out in my mind. When I was a junior in high school, our house caught on fire, which was very traumatizing. This was the same house that my mom had actually grown up in as a kid, so it was really hard on her. I had lived there most of my life. Our dryer caught on fire, and the house went up in flames. So that was really hard as a junior in high school to, have that happen. It was very scary. The neat part was, that was one of the first things I remember where God really showed up. I mean, he'd always been there as a part of my life, but this was like, we had nothing. We, had no clothes. We had nothing, no furniture, we had nowhere to live, and God provided every step of the way. And it was really, really cool as a, what would I have been, 16-year-old, to see God provide for my family like that, to the point where people dropped off bags of clothes at our front doorstep. There was a house just about, 6 houses down the street or something that opened up that we were able to rent while our house was being rebuilt. That was amazing, because if you've ever had to build a house or rebuild a house, you have to be there a lot to pick things out and all this stuff. And it was amazing for it to be down the street so that we could be a part of that process. So that was awesome. God provided that. Our trash man dropped off an entire Thanksgiving dinner, because this happened in November, and him and I don't know if it was other coworkers, but they provided a whole Thanksgiving dinner for us. It was so neat to just see God provide in all those ways. So that was one of the big things that I feel like, as hard as it was, it shaped a lot of me and who I am and who I was, because I saw, man, no matter what, like, God's there for you. He is going to help you. So we got through that. While we were living at the rental house, another thing that happened was we found out my mom had cancer. This was really, really hard on me because I was so close to my mom. We were like best friends. I just admired her, looked up to her, and it was devastating to think that we were going to lose her. So that was another shakeup that I struggled with, and understanding, like, God, we just got through our house burning down, and why is this happening? But she was able to have surgery. They got all the cancer out and she was okay. She was fine. So another way that God provided for me and provided for my family, and just showed, hey, I'm here. You can trust me. So life hasn't always been easy, but God's always been there for me. And that's why everything I do, I try to consult with God, and I try to make all my decisions revolve around God and his plans. So anyway, after that, I ended up going to college. I went to a small Bible college. I went there hoping to meet the one, I was hoping to get a degree too, but I really was hoping to meet, Mr. Perfect, Mr. Right. So a lot of my friends, this was a Bible college, so a lot of my friends did find somebody, and a lot of them got married. By the time we graduated, people were either engaged or getting married, and I didn't have anybody. And I was really discouraged about this. I didn't understand why. I was like, at the time, 20, how old was I? Maybe 23 when I graduated, and 23 felt so old just because I had friends who were 18 that got married and got engaged. And I had dated some people throughout college, but I was waiting for that one. And this is something that, going back to my dad, one of the positive sides, I feel like you can find positive in any negative situation. And I feel like the positive that came out of having an alcoholic father was, I think if I hadn't had that, if I just had, regular dad, I maybe would have had different standards when it came to dating or when it came to finding a mate. But because I saw the negative side of alcohol, me and my siblings, none of us, I don't think any of us have ever drank before. We have just all decided, alcohol doesn't even have a place in our life. So because of that, I had very high standards of what I wanted in a husband. So even though I had dated some Christians in college, they weren't the spiritual leader I was looking for. And anyway, so I kept waiting. And I was just like, okay, there's got to be somebody for me. But I got to the point once I graduated that I realized, okay, I'm done. I've been trying, I've dated certain people, and I finally am at the point where I'm like, I'm just going to hand it over to God. I'm done looking anymore. The fall after I graduated, my sister was dating someone and wanted me to come meet his boss. And I think it was really just my sister wanted to go hang out with her boyfriend, but she wanted me to come. She was like, you should come with us and come meet his boss. And I'm like, oh my word, his boss. When I used to tell the story, I would say that his boss, I'd be like, oh, his boss is probably like 40. Well, now that I'm over 40, that makes me sad that I used to say that, because that was really old. It's not old now. But anyway, I thought he was like going to be this old man, but I was like, whatever, I'll go with my sister. I'll go hang out with her. So we went to go help paint a house. That's what they were doing. And so I never painted anything before in my life, but we went ahead and went and showed up. And honestly, totally honest, we showed up in that driveway, and this man was standing there. This guy was standing there. And I honestly remember it with like the whole foggy, and music, like the harp music and stuff. I don't think that really happened, but that's how I remember it. Like, I remember it like, man, who is this? Like, this is, like in the Hallmark movies or something, like Mr. Dreamy, perfect man is standing right there. So I immediately was drawn to him. His name's Heath. It was just cool because I had been waiting, and I felt like God, I felt like it was just in God's hand, but that maybe there wasn't somebody for me. And then I meet him, and he was just amazing. And we clicked that day to the point where I called my mom while we were still there. And I was like, I just met the perfect guy. And anyway, 20 some years later, almost 20 years later, we are married. We're happily married. And it was neat. That was all God's plan, God's timing. So another way that he provided for us. Skip forward a little ways. So we dated, we got engaged. I think it was maybe 18 months altogether with like engagement and dating, and got married in June of that year. And immediately after our honeymoon, we moved out to Ohio so that he could go to college in Ohio here. And that was a big step for me because all my family lived in Virginia, and no one had really moved away. And so it was a big deal. That was a really hard thing for my mom, for me to move away. It wasn't quite as hard for me because I was moving with a new husband, but it still was hard because I was leaving my family. But God provided, again, in so many ways. So we showed up in Ohio. We had been looking for, it was hard to look for houses when you live in a different state. So we'd come up and looked at houses on weekends and things like that. But I think we had finally found the house we wanted, but we couldn't close on it for a couple more weeks. But we needed to be out there for him to start college. So we were calling around trying to find a place to stay for a few weeks as this newlywed couple that didn't know anybody. Somehow my husband had a connection with a person who had a connection with another person and called and said, hey, would you take in these two newlyweds for a couple weeks? This really sweet couple. And they said yes. Now, I don't know very many people who would take in strangers into their home, but they did. And I will tell you, this couple is one of the most amazing couples you'll ever meet. And God absolutely had his hand on this and knew that we needed them in our life. So they ended up being like parents to us, like grandparents to our kids. We're still close to them today. We love them so much. It was so neat that it was this couple that decided to let these two strangers in and stay in their basement for a couple weeks, and we're like family. So that was a really neat part of our testimony as well. We moved into our house. We lived there for 4 years while my husband went to college, and then we had a daughter. Oh, one other thing. While we were living there, in this town, this small town, I did struggle to find a job. I had been a teacher over in Virginia, but when I came here, I wasn't certified in Ohio, so I couldn't teach here. And I struggled to find a job. My husband didn't have a job yet because he was going to go to school, to college there. So we did struggle with money for a while there. Where it was like, how are we going to pay the bills? And it was so neat to see God work and provide. There were so many times where, like you get money at your wedding and checks and things like that. Well, months later, we would randomly I remember we got like $100 check on this 1 week where we were like, how are we going to pay the electric bill or whatever it was? We got this late check that someone had sent us for our wedding, and it was the perfect amount we needed, the perfect timing we needed. Little stuff like that. Like I feel like throughout my whole life, God has always done that little thing to provide. It's not always been this big, elaborate, everything's better, everything is amazing for you. He doesn't necessarily work like that, but he'll give you these little peeks into, hey, I've got this. Hey, you're good. I'm here. And just that reassurance that God's got everything under control. So no matter how hard things have ever been, God's always provided. And that's why he's such a huge part of my life. He's never let me down. I let him down all the time, but he's never let me down. Once we had our first daughter, we had a child every 2 years or so. So we have 3 girls and a boy, and they're all about 2 years apart. And that was, motherhood is amazing. So once I had my third daughter, I started thinking about sending my daughter to school, and that's where homeschooling came into the picture. I never in my life thought I would homeschool. I thought homeschoolers were weird. Like the ones I knew growing up wore homemade matching dresses and stood in a line, and this one family had a big baby was like their eighth child and they carried him around in a wagon. It was just like, who are these people? Like, I never thought I'd homeschool ever. Guess what? God put it on my heart to homeschool. I thought it was weird. I thought no way. But then I also thought we had started looking into schools, and for my daughter, she was going into preschool, and I was like, all right, well, let's go look. We need to put her into school. So we went to this local Christian school, and it was so much. I don't remember how much it was. It was like $2,000 or something for preschool. And I'm like, I used to be a teacher. I could teach her ABCs. We don't need to go. She doesn't need to go to preschool for that and go into debt to have somebody else teach her when I could. So that was kind of the start of it. My husband wasn't quite on board. He also thought homeschooling was weird and didn't think it was a good idea. But he said I could go ahead and do preschool and we'll just see how it goes from there. And I ended up, I talked to my sister-in-law about it because she had been in the same boat where she felt like God had, they did this years before us, but she felt like God had called her to homeschool, but my brother wasn't on board. And so she said, so I asked her, I'm like, what did you do? What do I do now when he doesn't want me to homeschool, but I feel like I'm supposed to do it? And she said, just pray about it. She's like, I prayed for like a year and then he was on board and God just changed his heart. So I was like, all right. So as I did her preschool year of schooling with my other little ones, playing near us and figuring everything out, I was also praying for my husband that if God really wanted me to homeschool, that he would change his heart. And he did. And he went to a homeschool convention with me so that he could see that people were normal. I really think that was a big help to see that it was just like they're normal, everyday people. There's people that have matching dresses, but there's people that don't. So that was really pivotal in getting him to see that, hey, this is the best thing for our children. So we ended up homeschooling. We have been homeschooling ever since then. So that one little girl that was in preschool is now in 10th grade, and I've been homeschooling ever since. And I never thought that would happen. It was one of those things where we just were like, let's take it year by year, and God has allowed us to be able to do that. We had a pretty easy first 15-ish years of marriage. It was quite easy, I would say. So if you're in that easy stage, beware because things may change. We had our beautiful children. My husband was a police officer. I was staying at home. We were fine. We were doing good. We were never like making tons of money because I stayed home. We weren't one income, but it was enough. It was always enough. Fast forward a little ways. In 2019, we decided we were kind of like, life is good. My husband, like I said, used to do home renovations. So we had always talked about wanting to rent out something, or like actually our first house that we bought back when we first got married, we did rent out for a few years when we moved, and we didn't really enjoy being landlords. It was kind of a pain. I did not like it. There were certain things about it I didn't like, but we'd always thought about flipping houses or something like that because my husband is super handy and can do all that stuff. So I think it was 2019, there was a house that came up for sale in an amazing location in this tiny little town in Amish country, fairly close to us. It was this rundown old farmhouse, and I was like, we should get this and turn it into a bed and breakfast. I'd always thought that would be amazing. I loved Gilmore Girls. So if you guys have seen Gilmore Girls, I was like, oh, I want an inn. I want to do that. It just seemed like a dream. So we actually bid on the house, not thinking we'd get it at all. And we got it. That was kind of a shock. So this was just a fun thing for us. Like, we were doing fine financially. My husband had a full-time job. So as he would go to the police station and work, and then he would come home and work on the inn. And so for about a year, he worked on the inn and renovated it and made it beautiful and amazing. And it was a family project. We helped too, but my kids were younger, so he did pretty much all the work. So then at the end, it was almost done. Like, we had everything done except for the dryer wasn't put in yet, I think. But everything else in the inn had been done. We were prepared to open in just a couple months, and my husband got COVID. And there were a handful of people at church that got it at the same time. Anyway, it wasn't terrible. He didn't end up in the hospital. He just got it, was sick for a week or whatever, and then he was okay. Went back to work for a month. Then in January, so that was in November of 2019, January of 2020, he started to have these weird symptoms, weird problems. He was struggling to drive. He was struggling to like pay attention, doing certain things that used to come so easily to him. And we were really confused about what was happening. So things continued to go downhill for him and just continued to get worse and worse and worse. And we went to many, many doctors to try to figure out what it was. And this was right at the beginning of COVID. Nobody knew anything. Doctors knew absolutely nothing. And I think he went over, during that year, he went to over 90 appointments trying to get answers and trying to get help for what was going on with him. So quick summary, he is a COVID long hauler. His issues are neurological, which affects everything in your body. I never really realized how much of your body can be affected by the brain, but so much can. Anything from the way the blood pools in your legs, the way your digestive system works, your ears, your head, everything. So he's had all kinds of issues that have made it difficult. He ended up not being able to work as a police officer anymore, which was his passion, and he loved it, and that was heartbreaking. So he couldn't even drive anymore. He was struggling to drive to work. It was about a 30-minute drive, and he said he would get to the point where he's going through a stoplight and saying, it's green, it's green, it's green, it's green, like telling himself, because his brain wasn't connecting right with his eyes and things. So he ended up obviously realizing he couldn't be a police officer anymore, let alone even drive much. That was really hard. That was one of the hardest things we've ever had to face, because he was heartbroken. That was his dream job. He loved being a police officer. So, and that's who he was. And he was amazing at it. He was so good. It actually took a long time to get the disability process. That was painful, and trying to prove to this disability board that you have a disability that's completely invisible. It's hard, because he's a strong looking police officer looking man. He looked like he's totally fine, but yet he's struggling so much, but everything's invisible. It's all inside. That was really hard. He eventually did get awarded disability, which was huge. The Lord absolutely provided. That was something we never thought would happen after going through this process. So that was huge, because he's not able to work anymore. So that was great being able to get that. We still had our inn over these years, which we remember had bought as just a fun kind of hobby thing. And it ended up being a blessing for us, because we never would have thought something like this would happen to us. And I wanted to continue homeschooling. I felt like God had called me to that. So it was hard to think, if my kids were in school, it's like, okay, your husband can't work, then you go work. But it's not that easy. When you're a homeschool mom, your homeschooling is a job in itself. You just don't get paid. So that was really hard. And we had an inn to run. And anyway, the inn ended up being really good for us for a couple years. But later, as my children got older and homeschooling got harder, or got more involved, having a high schooler now, it's a lot more. We don't just get done in just a few hours. Our school day is longer. The inn became something that he had to do, because I didn't have time to do it, which was really hard, because he just physically isn't the same person anymore. So what maybe would take an average or pre-COVID Heath would have taken 2 hours to clean the inn, where now it takes him 4. It's just a lot harder for things like that. So this year we got to the point where we realized that it was just too much. And because I couldn't take on anymore with having kids in basketball and me being the sole driver for the most part, he's actually done better and able to drive more than he used to be able to, but it's still a struggle sometimes. So I would do a lot of that. So me taking on so much made it hard for me to help with the inn at all. So the inn became too much, and it became a burden for us. The sad thing is, that was my heart. That was if you've ever started a business from scratch, this was something that I put my heart into decorating this place. It was beautiful. I loved it so much. We have a guest book full of all these people that talked about how beautiful it was and how neat, and how they could tell how much love was put into it. So it meant a lot to me. And finding out that we can't really do this anymore was heartbreaking. It took a lot of prayer for me to get on the same page, but we realized we needed to sell the inn. That is a recent thing that some of you guys have followed me and know little bits and pieces of our life, but that was really hard. That was one of the hardest things I've had to decide, was, okay, let's do it. We need to sell it. So we had an auction actually last week, and we've got a couple more weeks of ownership, and then we're done with it. The neat thing is, I cried about it a lot over the last couple months, but I'm at the point where after a lot of prayer, God really has given me peace about it, which I didn't think would happen. It really, even to the point where I was super, super sick the week of the auction, to where I didn't get out of bed for 6 days. And as a mom, that's really hard when there's a lot to do, and I just couldn't. We had the flu, and I was just really, really sick. I think God made me sick that week so that I was distracted from the auction, because it just kind of happened. The auction happened. I was sick. I couldn't, go to it. I couldn't sit there and be sad and have regrets and have second thoughts. I feel like even stuff like that, like something that just felt really frustrating at the time, feeling miserable all the time, I realized, I think that was part of God's plan too. He has given me peace about this. It sold for an amount that we were happy with. And even though it's sad and it wasn't the easiest thing, it is something that we really feel like that's just part of God's plan. His plan is weird, I will say. Like, over my life, there've been a lot of things that felt like, why is this part of your plan? It's hard. There's a lot of hard things that I don't understand, that, you have been through things, I'm sure, where you're like, why in the world am I having to go through this? But there's a reason for it. God has a reason for it. And even if it's just for me to share this story and comfort someone who's going through something similar, just to encourage you that you will get through this if you trust in God. And it doesn't mean that things are not going to be hard. It doesn't mean that our life is all of a sudden going to be peachy and perfect, because it's not, because my husband still struggles with his health, and we still are on, his disability income, and it's not easy, but I am trusting the Lord because he's never let me down. We've had other little things I didn't even share, some of the ups and some of the downs. I don't want to make this a 3-hour video, but there's so many things in our life that God has done for us, and you've got to make sure you give credit where it's due. And that is huge. And that's what we're trying to teach our children. We actually have this little book that is called our Blessings book. And we have written down, ever since this whole COVID thing started with my husband, we have started writing down ways that God provided. Every time something happened, I'll share one quick thing. When we were going through the hardest time, he lost his job, and insurance was one of the biggest headaches because it's expensive. We had amazing insurance before through his police department, and then all of a sudden we had no insurance, or we had terrible insurance, and we realized that having to pay for it ourselves is like astronomical. It's crazy. So there was this one point where he was leaving his job, and the Cleveland Clinic, through which is who all his appointments were through, they called us and said that they were going to cover the next 18 months of our health insurance. They were going to cover the cost of it, which was about $42,000. I mean, can you believe that? I could not even fathom that. That was one of those things where we absolutely immediately gave God the credit, because that's all God. Who does that? Like, I've never heard of a big hospital corporation doing something like that, but he'd had so many appointments with them. They knew they wanted him to be able to continue his health, journey with them. And that was just huge. Like, we didn't have $42,000 to cover that and have the same insurance, to have the same doctors. Like, that was amazing. So there are different ways that God provided for us. There's one other thing. I said I was only going to share one thing. I'll share one other thing. 2 of my girls needed braces right before my husband, I think it was right before my husband got sick. We found out that they needed braces. I had taken them to go get their scans and whatever. And we were talking about it was like $6,000 a kid. And so we're like, just like every other person, we're going to pay for it. We're going to do it. And then he lost his job and everything fell apart. And I was like, we can't do this. So I went back and told them, we can't. There's no way. We can't afford this. But our girls they could survive without braces. I have crooked teeth, you don't really need them, but they did need them. And And anyway, they told the doctor that we were going to told us about a program they had that was like the scholarship program. Your kid can write an essay about how getting braces or Invisalign for free would change their life. So both of our girls wrote an essay about what this would mean to them and about kind of what their dad had gone through, which was neat. Homeschooling, I'm like, you guys write this essay. We got to see, like, this was like real life stuff. They wrote this essay, they turned it in. It was many, many months. We didn't think we were going to get it. We got a call that they both got Invisalign for free. Like, it was covered for the entire duration of their needing it, which is almost 2 years. That's God. I mean, that's nothing but God. And there have been so many ways that God has provided for our family. There's never a reason for me to give up hope. No matter how hard things get, He's always provided for us. And I hope you've experienced this. And if you haven't, turn to God, because He doesn't always provide for everything, that you want, but He does provide for what you need. And I'm so grateful for that. Fast forward a little bit. We are where we are. My family is in this situation where my husband's on disability. I'm actually waitressing now, doing waitressing a couple nights a week, and I do YouTube. We're not rolling in money, but I have been given an opportunity for my oldest daughter and I to go to South Africa. Now, when I first was asked about this, a group from our church is going, and someone asked me if I would be interested in going, and I thought, well, there's no way. We can't afford that. There's no way. And money was my big thing. I was like, there's no way we can afford to do that, let alone both of us. But I started praying about it, and I felt like this was what God wanted me to do. I felt like, I've actually never been overseas for a missions trip. Obviously, my daughter's never been overseas for a mission trip. And I've done some stuff locally over my life and like high school and stuff like that, but I've never been somewhere else. And I just felt like this is something that God's going to use for me to help others, to strengthen my faith. I'm stepping out in faith and trusting that God's going to provide for me and my daughter to be able to go to South Africa. So this summer we are going, and I am so excited to see what the Lord's going to do through this and how He's going to change our hearts, because I know it's going to be life-changing. The biggest thing that we are trusting in faith is for God to provide, because for myself and for my daughter, it's about $2,800 each. So it's a lot of money for both of us to raise. But I have friends who've gone on trips before who have told me, God's going to provide. If this is something you're doing for Him, He's going to provide the money. So that's where you guys come in. All I want to do is put it out there that I do have this platform that I figured was a waste for me to not share this with you guys. That first of all, I'd love for you guys to pray for me and my daughter for safety for this trip and for God's provision and for, just our spiritual walk as we go through this. I think it's about 10 days that we'll be going. But I also want to share, if you do feel led and you are in a place financially where you could help us out, that would be awesome. So I'm just going to put a link in the description box below. And if you feel led by the Lord to donate to our trip to support us and help us to be able to go on this trip to South Africa, that would be amazing. We would love it. I can't even explain how grateful I would be for you guys to be able to help us out. If you can't, that's totally fine. Pray for us, please. We would love that. But I know God's going to provide in one way or another. So if you're able to and you want to, then if you could click on the description box below, I'll just have there's a link for me and a link for my daughter. If you want to give, if you are able to give a little bit for me, or if you're able to give a little bit for her, or one or the other, or whatever you can do, we'd be grateful for anything. But I just want to throw that out there. But I'm excited to see what the God's going to do, because he's always been so good to me and so good to my family. And this just gives you a little bit of a glimpse into me and who I am. And you may be surprised about some of the things that happened in my life and how I can still smile and how I can still be grateful and find the humor in life. And it's because of God, and it's because He's always been there for me. So I hope this encouraged you guys. I really thank you guys for being here. And please give me a thumbs up if you did like this video. And I know this was kind of long, but I appreciate you guys sticking with me. And don't forget to subscribe for more homeschooling, mom life, and thrifting content. And I will be giving you guys an update after our trip. I can't wait to share how the trip goes. It's not till summer, so I still have a few months to try to raise the money and get everything ready and prepared, but we already got our passports and we are ready to go. So I'm really excited. So thank you guys so much for being here. And if you're able to help us out in any way, the link is in the description box below. I just thank you guys so much for being here. Okay, see you guys next time. Bye.